What's going on, Soul Tribe? I salute the divinity in you, and welcome to my channel, Alchemist. Justin here, and bringing another little nugget to add to the Soul Tribe archive. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about Mars in Gemini in the first house. And this is an interesting one curious one for Mars to be in. Now, when you talk about that red planet Mars, Mars was known as the lesser malefic. So Mars, can stir up some trouble. The nature of Mars on a kind of lower level can be this kind of acts of just like excessive aggression, or this anger, frustration. There's even a misdirection or deceptive quality to Mars. Mars can indicate those who excel at wrongdoings. It can be imprisonment, and this it's a very hot, dry, inflammatory type of energy that it brings. The acts of like cutting and separation and things. But when Mars is worked with constructively, learn how to work with that. Mars can make those who go to action. You think about like the kind of like the generals, or the kind of like the sort of like military officers and things like that. That can be where Mars really can kind of help people shine, put people in this sense of leadership, this act of courage to face any kind of challenges that come up, this sense of seizing the day, action, and facing one's fears. So, there's a constructive side with Mars as well. But that's especially true too if you have a night chart. Mars is a lot more easy to work with, more constructive to work with. I mean, it still would do martial things, but their challenges are more surmountable, whereas a day chart, Mars can be a little bit harder to deal with. In like Mars transits and things. Now, when we're talking about Gemini, Gemini is ruled by Mercury, and they are the mutable air sign, and they are active or yang in nature. And when you think about Gemini having that mercurial influence, the mind is just busy with Gemini. The air's free in that energy. It's light. It can be fun. It can be it's a very smart energy, I find, with Gemini. It can absorb a lot, very perceptive. And I think that there is even an inspired quality to Gemini. I think improvisation, when I think about their energy, being able to think on your toes, think very quick on your feet, and I think that there is a very curious nature to Gemini, to find the answers for things, and again to take in as much information as possible, to be able and to, not just like reading and listening, but to be able to communicate that stuff as well. There, I think there's a real kind of power when we're thinking about Gemini energy, and how flexible the thoughts can be when we're working with them. Then, when you talk about the first house, this is the most important house because this is in ancient astrology. This is the helm. This is it's one of the angular houses, and this is where one of the sensitive points are at. The ascendant lives if you're working with whole sign. And some of the themes that the first house covers are going to deal with like the life, the body, your health, and really, so the big thing really is like it's the beginning of all actions. And beginnings may manifest in this house here. So when you're working with this placement, a few things to consider. One, you'd have a Gemini rising by whole sign. That's easy. And you're going to want to look to Mercury, because Mercury is going to import the themes of this house and of the fourth house, which deals with like your parents, your home, your family. All that's going to go to wherever Mercury is located. And the Mars is going to import the themes of the sixth house, which deals with like illnesses, injuries, subordinates, work, and pets. And then also the 11th house, which deals with like friends, groups, alliances, hopes, and dreams, and things like that. So one thing that I would really kind of talk about with this placement too, you want to see, considering that Mars is in an angular house, one, again, find out whether you have a day or a night chart, because then that's going to show how we're working with Mars here. But regardless, you want to see if Mars is on one of the angles, whether it's squaring like the midheaven, that MCIC axis, or if it's like conjunct the ascendant or anything, because those martial themes are going to be more prominent. And one thing that I would talk about with this person is making sure to take care of the body. Especially if you find yourself one if you're like accident prone, make sure to take the extra precautions, maybe putting on, let's say we're thinking groups, for example, maybe you're a part of some kind of motocross group or some kind of biker group or something where, where, where there's chances for just accidents and things. Just, again, making sure to take care of the body, because I think that with Mars, things happen quick. So just something to think about there, but just having a good sense of just like, taking care of the body as far as like getting enough rest, especially I would think with Mars and Gemini, that could be very busy mental energy. So making sure to get enough sleep, being mindful of what you're eating, being mindful of, just movement too. I think that that's one way if you do find yourself getting in, really kind of stuck in your head there, that martial energy needs to move. So working out can be a really great one, whether it's going for a run or even going for a walk, and maybe just like talking with a friend or something like that, just kind of get the thoughts out. Journaling can be a great one too. I have a Gemini moon, and I find journaling can be of whatever length, and it doesn't have to be anything cohesive. Just let it be a mind dump. Just like as the thoughts come, just write them down. Just sometimes to just get them out, because in that way it helps the mind kind of simmer down a little bit, and it lets you process things that are going through your mind at that rate, and it just kind of helps slow that stuff down so that new stuff can come in, because it will. So that would just be another thing that I would talk about with someone there. With Mars there, especially if there's challenges maybe because Mars, I think, in the first house can be like this sort of like self-undoing, especially when we're thinking about like maybe the mental games that we can play with ourselves. Like I said, Mars can be deceptive or kind of like misdirection. And so maybe, if you notice those doubts kind of creep in, pay attention to that inner dialogue, the things that try to get in your way. Have those friends, that groups that can help you to kind of bounce some ideas off of when maybe you're kind of going through a rut there. And you might even be too, kind of vice versa, be that force to help other people kind of get through when they're going through kind of like 6th house themes, or maybe 12th house themes, 8th house themes, things like that, when they're going through some troubles. You could be a force that can kind of help motivate people. I would be mindful though, just because I think when I think about Mars and, just even Gemini sometimes, when it's hot, Gemini can be cutting, it's fast, it's glib. So, and especially having those martial themes behind that, I would think that this could be a very strong kind of communicator, which I think would be great for, for forming friends, making groups, kind of having maybe a variety of friends and things. But I'd be mindful about what's the 6th house enemies can also come up in that house. So, just being mindful of what you're saying and things like that, where it's not always jokes all the time. I think that Gemini, once again, keeps things light and stuff, and that doesn't maybe always translate well. So that could be something that maybe could potentially come up there. I mean, it's when it comes to things of work, I could definitely see this being very health focused. This would be great because Mars deals, is really great work doing things that are associated with like the hands. So that could even be like surgeon, I think would be a really great one for that, or any sort of like medical type thing. Musician, I think would be something great for that, like sculpting, anything that's like tactile like that. I think that's really kind of hands on. I think that would be a really kind of great way for Mars to, and I mean, you could probably learn a number of things. You could be like a jack of all trades, have a few things with Gemini, and that could even help, with your friends and things, and who knows how that helps you out there. But be thinking about your hopes and dreams. What do you want? What do you see yourself doing on a regular basis? What do you want to do for work? Are you managing people? What is that? Just all those sort of things there. But I'm trying to think what else could cover in this one. I would think too, just making sure to have those groups that you are involved in, groups that are very motivating, ones that help you to, I think, even kind of feed that curiosity, that open different doors for you to introduce, maybe even doing, I mean, because who knows, maybe you find like, maybe some friends kind of like open up different doors for you for work and things like that. That might be something that comes up. One thing I would also too kind of be mindful of, just when we're talking about the groups and friends and things that we're rolling with, just kind of pay attention to that, because you don't want there any sort of like trouble to kind of get into there, just because like Mars is so closely tied in with the body. So just be mindful of just the groups that you're hanging out with. If they're up to some shadiness, just kind of keep eyes on that, and just kind of distancing yourself from that. Another thing that I would think of, maybe even like working with pets, that could even be something too that comes up there when we think about those kind of 6th house themes, or having those relationships with just maybe good friend, maybe just a natural with animals or things like that. That may be something else that comes up there. But those would be just some kind of just like base things that I would, because I could definitely see this one too. I know I mentioned with the body, but I could definitely see this too. Just like with Gemini, I think has a lot of energy. Mars there, this could be a very athletic placement too. I think Mars in the first is, again, needs to move. The body needs to be, and it doesn't have to be anything aggressive again, but just something, whether it's yoga, something where you can dip into the body, but those would be just some like base things. I just got chess club that they even popped in my head, but those would be just some like base things that I would talk about, or you just kind of explore with people with this placement. You definitely need the whole chart to get a better picture of this. But if you have this placement or know someone who's working with this placement, down in the comment section, let us know how this has shown up for you. It's always really fascinating to see how these placements come to life. And if you happen to have this place and you want to get to know your chart more personally, or see when, let's say if you have a date chart, maybe you want to get eyes on these kind of Mars transits, or when you happen to be in like Mars years, or things like that, or if you want to do any sort of like electional things as far as like planning a trip, buying a home, buying a car, things along those lines, then down in the description box is a link to book a consultation with me. And if you have any questions about the services that I provide, my email's down there as well, so definitely feel free to reach out to me. And then there are a couple of links that are for playlists that deal with, one is the sun and where the other celestial or other classical planets are located, like what signs they're in, what signs are going to be most affected, and how to most practically work with those energies. And then the other one is the lunar shenanigans, and it talks about the astrology of the moon, what sign it's in, what phase it's in, when it happens to be going void of course, and then just the general feel of the week, as the moon is making conversations with the different celestial bodies. So all that's available down there for you. But until next time, stay mindful out there, keep raising that vibration through the roof, and I will catch you on the next one. Later.